What's the joke that your SO can't stand but you say anyways? Story 1. A lawyer gets arrested and dragged into the police station for interrogation. He says, "I'm not saying a word without my lawyer present." The cops say, "We don't understand, you are a lawyer." He says, "Exactly, so where's my goddamn present?" "We are both lawyers." She says it ruins her birthday, and such that I can't give her a gift without telling her that now that she has her lawyer present, I won't be asking her any questions, so I can't know where she wants to go to dinner, so I'll just have to pick, and I pick Taco Bell. Story 2. One time we were both a little scratched up from working on the yard, me on my knee and her on her arm. I went and got some Neosporin to put on my cuts, and she asked me to hand it to her so she can use it. I said, "This is Neosporin, you need Armasporin." And ever since then I've referred to Neosporin as the body part Osporin that it's needed for, and it drives her nuts. Story 3. Very situational, but at any aquarium, less rare than it could be since we have a pass to a local one, I make sure I find the eels first, making direct eye contact and say, "Babe, babe, babe, look," point at the eel, and then, "That's amore/amore." He has never once laughed, and I have never once regretted it. Story 4. My wife loves to sing little made-up songs all the time. I think it's adorable, but I like to give her a hard time. One time we were walking into the grocery store and she's singing some made-up little jingle, so I said, "It's a good thing you're cute," and without missing a beat, she cheerily said, "I'm also a notary," which is funny because she has to be a notary for her job. It was just really random. I about fell over laughing because it was perfect timing and everything. Every once in a while I'll hit her with, "You're also a notary." Doesn't sound as funny written out. Story 5. It was such a weak joke the first time she rolled her eyes. Ever since it just is annoying, but I can't stop. I just say, "I love the Beatles," at the end of any classic rock song I hear on the radio. If it's actually the Beatles, I go with Queen. Story 6 had a BF that told me a joke one time, and it was so stupid and basic, I couldn't help but laugh because he said it. Ever since then, he would stop mid-conversation and say, "My name," and I'd go, "Yeah," and he'd hit me with, "What do you call a fish wearing a bow tie?" It was sweet because he would always laugh before he could get the joke out and I'd know what was coming. The answer was sophisticated. He was a dorky kind of funny, but we weren't too compatible as a couple, so we went back to being friends. Story 7. My husband insists on calling ketchup cat shit. It's so gross. One day I'm going to hit him in the head with a shovel and bury him in the yard, and it will be for this joke and the way he eats wings. Story 8. Whenever we watch something and this program is for mature audiences, only screen comes on, I groan and say, "Damn it, we have to turn this off, I'm not mature." And he silently considers how inconvenient a divorce would be. Story 9. Not so much a joke, but whatever. When my wife and I first started dating, we hung out with a group of couples around our ages. Newly dating for a while, and recently married. My wife and I went over to one of the couple's apartments for a group hangout one evening. We had picked up a family-size bag of chips and a container of onion dip to bring. I had taped a label onto the chips and dip that said, "Bago Chips" and "Jarro Dip," referencing some drunken guy chatter from a party earlier that year. I thought it was hysterical. My wife didn't get the humor. We were standing at the apartment door ready to knock, and my wife turns to me and says, "It's not funny. No one will know why you did that. You need to take the labels off. They're gonna think you're an idiot." Lol, I kept the labels on. We went inside. The other guys at the party got the reference right away and were falling over themselves laughing. The host went and got some paper and tape and made labels for all the other snacks. The girlfriends' wives just looked at each other and rolled their eyes or looked at us like they were reevaluating their options. Lol. It was stupid male bonding over the stupidest thing. It's a wonder how we were even with women. Ha ha. Story 10. Once, when my wife and I were just dating, we spent 2 weeks in China, and we visited this super cute little coffee shop and had such a good time we sat and chatted for like 2 hours. The only thing was they had this song, Pills by Gary Jules, playing on repeat the entire time. It was mind-numbing every time the song would fade out and right back into the start. Ever since then, for the last 7 years or so, anytime I ask her what she wants to listen to and I get a vague response or non-answer, I will just put on Pills by Gary Jules on repeat and usually make sure it plays through a few times before she finally grabs the phone to change it. If I die first, you know I'm having that song played at my funeral. Story 11. My husband usually has long hair that needs to be put in a ponytail/bun, and when he makes the mistake of asking if I have a hairband instead of a hair tie, I always start naming 80s glam metal bands. It drives him up the wall, and he immediately regrets using this phrase. Story 12. Every time we're finally minutes away from home after a long, multi-hour road trip, I say, "Oh shoot, I forgot my sunglasses back at the hotel. Mind if I turn around?" Not one laugh in over 7 years, but that doesn't stop me from saying it after every single road trip, without fail. What it lacks in funniness, it makes up for in consistency. Story 13. I've got a problem where I love Indian flatbread too much, to the point that I've thought about joining Naan Anan. Some folks think it's a good idea, but then I get to talking about it and can't stop. I can go on and on about Naan Anan. Every time someone new falls into the trap of letting me start blathering about this, it's just a progression of larger and larger sighs and eye rolls, but I know I'm right. Story 14. Not BF, but Dad, he loves that joke. What do you call a deer with no eyes? No eye deer. So every frigging time someone, usually me, says they have no idea about something, my dad yells, "No eye deer? Hey, what do you call a deer with no eyes?" And I sit simultaneously loving the level of dad jokeness and also wishing like hell I'd chosen different words to answer his question. Edit. I didn't read the question closely enough, and so my answer is a little mixed up. But I don't have many jokes anyway, so. Story 15. One time, when together she was trying to console me when I was feeling pretty down that day, I felt extremely unattractive, and she wanted to tell me I wasn't ugly, but English is her 5th language, and she hit me with, "I will never say you're good-looking." She forgot the not. So every time she makes any kind of mention about how much she loves / likes / wants me, still, I'll hit her with, "I must have a great personality then, since you'll never tell me I'm good-looking." She hates that joke, lol. Story 16. We used to do this together, but now I just do it and she hates it, but anything that ends in an A or ER, etc., I'd repeat the word and say, "I hardly know her." Like Gardner, I hardly know her. Like it's an innuendo and I'm shocked someone would suggest it. Obviously, the original is liquor, I hardly know her, but any word works and to me is hilarious. "Babe, shall we get this calendar?" "Calendar? I hardly know her." Story 17. Not me, but friends of mine. Been married for years. She can't focus on one thing, so she will be busy telling him something and then go, and he'll say, "Quickly, say it before you forget." And her whole face changes. And she says, "Nice, thank you, now I did forget every single time." Story 18. About 3 months into me dating my GF, I got drunk with some college friends and told them about how strong my feelings were for her. Apparently, I sent my GF a super sappy drunk text through Snapchat that night that ended in "I lo." I had not told her yet. About 3 months later, she told me "I love you too," before I had officially said it and told me about the text. Now, over 3 years later, about half the time we tell each other "I love you," she just says "I lo" instead. It's embarrassing as fuck for me still, but she loves it. Story 19. I had a stroke a few years ago and my partner was very upset, understandably. Part of how I have continued to cope with it is when I read something that is so poorly written that I cannot break it down. I will say something to the extent of "This sentence is so bad I thought I was having another stroke." She gets very upset, but I think she also understands that it's part of me taking possession of a traumatic event. Story 20. Every time I use a stepladder for anything, I ask her, "Do you know why I have a stepladder?" I then wait for her to roll her eyes and reluctantly ask why for the millionth time, and then I say, "Because my real ladder left when I was 5. Story 21. I don't know why I started doing this, but whenever someone wants something from me, asks a favor, tells me to do anything, I jokingly charge them money. Example, coworker asked me to put up a sign somewhere. My immediate response is always $20 dollar. My SO hates this for some reason and sometimes tries telling me how I'm not funny, and I'm usually like, "I'm hilarious, shut up." True story. I worked in a public health center, and in order to pick up your prescriptions, you needed to carry this little yellow card with your info on it. It was basically like a small index card, and people lost them constantly. We didn't charge for new ones. You could just come up and pick up a new one. I made it a joke to pretend to charge people for it for the lulz. One time I did this, and the guy was already in a giggly happy mood and proceeds to tell me, "I ain't got $1.20, but I can get you weed." So I do this again with this other guy, and then told him the above story, and this guy goes, "You don't get a girl weed, you bring her flowers." This guy went out and bought me a bouquet of flowers. I was so in shock. No one has ever randomly given me flowers like this before. It was so sweet. Also, he was married, LOL. I'll never forget him. On another note, I once made an invoice for the dentist at the health center because I always charged him Pretend. $5 whenever he needed a medical record pulled. One time he called upstairs and got my coworker and he said, "I'm glad I got you. Squid is always charging me $5." I made him an invoice and charged him interest just for saying that. Story 22. I wolf whistle at my girlfriend whenever I see her getting out of the shower, getting ready for bed, anytime she takes clothes off in a non-sexy situation. I've done it since we started dating 8 years ago. About a year into our relationship, she told me she doesn't like it and asked me to stop. So I did. No argument, just stopped. About 6 months later, we were laying in bed and she says, "Tonight when I got out of the shower, I was waiting for you to whistle, but then I remembered I'd asked you to stop. And now I kind of miss it." Ever since then, I have done it at every opportunity, and she just rolls her eyes and tells me to knock it off, but I know she'd miss it. Story 23. Early on in our marriage, my wife and I were grocery shopping together and we're on the pasta aisle when she says to me, "What kind of pasta should I use for fettuccine alfredo?" I looked at her at first to see if she was messing with me, but she was serious. 0.19 years later, and I still ask her what kind of pasta she's going to get whenever fettuccine alfredo is on the menu. Story 24. Not a case where he can't stand it, but more a case where he gets worried every time I make the joke. Once upon a time, I looked at my roommate at the top of the stairs, said, "Oh, bravo, this is Niner, we're going dark," and turned off the lights. I proceeded to slip on the first step and fall the entire way down. Every so often, if I'm headed downstairs, I'll say, "I'ma take a quick bravo Niner." He always shoots me a dirty look for it. Story 25. My husband and his older brother look a lot alike, but not like twins or anything, except when my husband gets his hair wet and parts it down the middle the way his brother's hair is. Coincidentally, the only time he does this is when we're in the shower, and it grosses me out because it's like he transforms into his brother in front of my eyes, and then I'm naked in the shower with his brother LOL. Story 26. One of my fiance's best friends is named Denise. Whenever she says they met up or chatted on the phone recently or the like, after a few seconds I'll often ask her, "And how is her brother, Denifew?" It's such a stupid joke, but I'll tell it almost every time to see that exasperated look on her face. Sometimes I don't even say it. I just smirk, and she can tell I'm thinking it. That annoyed look on her face is both adorable and rib-splittingly hilarious. Story 27. We were watching a show the other day, and a husband called the wife some weird name, but my wife misheard it and asked, "Did he just call her Mama Muffin?" So now that's my wife's nickname. She's not pleased. Story 28. More of a story, and my wife hates it. I now live in South Florida and worked in Miami, so my Spanish is better now, but when I was in the military, I was stationed in England, and English people love to go to Mallorca, Spain, and drink a lot. I went on one of these trips, and while very drunk had to use the toilet. Now I know the bartender spoke English, but I knew this was the moment to wow him with my Spanish skills, so I walked up to the bar, looked him in the eye, and as suavely as my drunk 20-year-old as could muster, asked, "Donde está la casa de pipi?" Some folks still find this funny. My wife finds it to be malo. Story 29, I'll explain this with examples. That's the best way I can tell about it. I called my girl into the room and said about the door. I said, "Just open and close it. It sounds funny." So she does. Sounds fine to her. So I'll open and close it and say I think the hinge needs fixing. And as I move the door, I rip a loud ass fart and change the pitch as I do it. Another example, a classic. I'd ask her to get some air freshening spray. She said, "Why?" I told her to come into the room. It smells moldy. She'd take a big whiff and fill her lungs with the fart I just demolished the room with. Last one, I told her I couldn't reach a spot on my back that was tight and needed her to massage it out a little. She'd get behind me to do it, where I'd rip the fart right in her face. I don't know why she keeps trusting me, but she is quite literally the best thing that has ever happened to me in this awful life. She really saves me.